about the looming middleweight title fight between Dricus du Plessis and Khamzat Chimaev. We'll be talking about the return of the Russian hammer, Artem Lobov, who delivered a fantastic interview with Ariel Helwani last week. We'll be talking about TKO and some misconceptions they attempted to clear up earlier this week with regard to their amendment of the Ali Act. We'll also be talking a bit more about the Tapology rankings because a certain man who's returning to the show today probably knows a bit more than we did when we talked about it a lot during the week and may have panned it a bit too hard. But listen, I can only tell the truth to you people, crackheads. Okay? When I see a crackhead, I tell them the truth. That's the promise I make to you. That's a promise I make to myself. We'll also be taking a look at this weekend's action. Another tremendous Apex card on the way to you. We also have PFL Africa and a big old outdoor event from Octagon, who are taking the European scene by storm. Now, I tease it a little bit up front. Me and the man of the hat have been waiting for the return of the prodigal son. You might know him as the man with the handsomest face and the biggest arms and the loveliest t-shirts, as Jordan says. It is Ben Fowlkes. Welcome back, sir. How are you?
I'm great. It's good to be back. I feel rested, refreshed, and damn it, I missed you. I missed you guys. I missed the Craic as my Friday routine. It's just Fridays aren't the same without this show.
Ben, I like that you just take those compliments that Petesy lobbed at you and just like, I know. It's good to be back, boys. You know, that sort of thing.
Listen, when you're the man, you don't go around shouting about how you're the man. You let other people tell you.
That's and they did, Ben. They fucking did tell us. Yep. They told me too much to the point where I got
you. This is really sticking with you, man.
I mean, it was a joke. It was like they just saw a Beyonce concert when I came on one day. They were like, Ben was here. Ah! And I was like, right, Jesus, like, did anyone do this while we were there? Chuck, can you remember any excitement?
No, the thing that they were saying after I was there was like, was Chuck here? That's what they said.
The trick is
they forgot immediately.
The mistake you guys made was you went there and you stuck around and like did the show and all that kind of stuff. And so,
nonsense.
You know, you got to be like Andre the Giant, like back in the Territories days, where it's like you see the Giant every night. It loses some of its novelty if he only comes through once every 3 months. You know, he really maintains some of the appeal. I was there for like 20-30 minutes, and then I was out on my way to the Mets game, just there long enough to make an impression and there to leave on a high note before everybody got sick of my bullshit. That's the way you got to do it.
With the Misfits font too. Man, that was a damn cool shirt. Yeah.
See, I'm glad somebody appreciated the Misfits font on the Mets because it is kind of subtle. It's not exactly like you got to know. And I felt like when I was at the actual Mets game, no one around
they don't
me
know.
seemed to appreciate my Misfits
I've seen that fan base, man.
To be honest, it was the first thing on air Jordan said to me. Like, in fairness, Ariel had talked about the strength, as did GC. I think Rick said something about you being so handsome. And then at the tail end of that, Jordan was like, and his t-shirt, my God, it was a Misfits Mets t-shirt. And I was like, all right.
Everyone had already said my compliments, so I had to throw on the shirt.
Well, and you know what? They were right. I was like going to a Mets game in the middle of the afternoon on a Wednesday, and I was like, it's surprising they even have. And they're like going to be a lot of camps. A lot of kids in camps. Sure enough, they start panning that camera around the stadium, and you know how they will put the kids in like the same bright neon green shirt so they don't lose them. There was a lot of that going on. But cheered the Mets to victory. Pete Alonso hit one out. I like to think I was close enough to the field to play a small role in the Angels manager getting thrown out while arguing balls and strikes late in the game, because I was only a few rows back from the field and close enough to tell the umpire, you don't need this. This guy's disrespecting you. You don't have to put up with this. And then gone. Great day at the ballpark.
Do they ration? Do they cap you off on how many beers you can have? Like, I've heard this a few times about American sports events.
If there's a limit, I didn't find it. I was trying.
I don't think so, man. They do stop serving though. I think what is it, mid-7th? Something like that, mid-7th, I think.
I think that the rule changed on that after they instituted the pitch clock. I don't know exactly what they changed it to, but for a while the rule was one thing. Especially, I think it ought to be different at some stadiums than others, because it's like, you know, if you're going to Dodger Stadium, you're driving out of there because it's LA.
Yeah.
If you're going to Yankee Stadium, if you're going to see the Mets,
that's true.
You're probably taking the subway out of there, so it's a little safer. But the baseball teams did find when they instituted the pitch clock, these games are getting over much faster. We're not making as much money at the concession stand from all the beers, so let us push it a little bit so we can keep selling the beers later.
I'll tell you who's a drunk crowd. I was just in Boston at a game, and we hung around afterwards just to kind of get some pictures of the Green Monster and all that. Walking out of there, under certain seats, there was piles of like 12 beers. I mean, these people were like putting them away for 9, and that was a fast game, like 2.5 total, And dude, it was a drunk crowd. That was a fun time.
You had nice seats as well, Chuck. You were right.
Yeah, those are nice.
Right? Like yeah, it was beautiful.
They played Sweet Caroline for you, buddy. They played Sweet Caroline.
Yeah, you did. I did see a Sweet Caroline reaction. One of my favorites. Lads, we better talk about MMA. That's what we're here to do. Charlie Olives, a bit of a shock announcement there. He is back on October 11th in Rio, the main event against Fiziev, a man who has turned his fortunes around very recently. Ben wrote about this. Ben, I got the impression reading your piece that a little bit surprised about the old timeline here.
I don't know if I would say surprised, because he did make it clear pretty quickly after the loss to Ilia Topuria that this is what he wanted, that he wanted to fight again sometime this year. And for the UFC to go down to Rio, that seems like a natural fit for him. It's been a few years since he's fought in Brazil. Also, the last time he fought at that card that was in, I want to say it was in Brasilia, but it was somewhere down in Brazil where it was the last one before the pandemic restrictions really took effect, and it was an empty arena, but it was not planned that way. It was they were going to have a normal like a fight night event, but then by the time the event we rolled around, Brazil was like, no, you can't have 20,000 people in here while this thing is jumping off. And so he fought in front of that empty arena, and it was both the last time he fought in Brazil and the last time he fought on a non-pay-per-view card. And so I can understand why if he wanted to fight sometime before the year's out, they thought this is a pretty good fit. It is, like, I do still think it's probably a bad idea, though, because how many times have we seen fighters do it where Ilia Topuria is involved, where you get knocked out and you want to turn around and fight again? We saw Alexander Volkanovski go through something similar, and I understand the impulse. You had that bad taste in your mouth. You lost. You want to get back in there. That's the only thing that kind of erases it for them. But it also seems like around 3 months after a bad knockout loss, which he said the only time he felt like he'd been really knocked out, where he didn't have any memory of it and people had to tell him what happened in the fight. He said he'd never gone through that. To go through that for the first time, to go through it in your mid-30s, where I can tell you, as a guy who's had a few concussions, your brain doesn't come back as easily from it the older you get. You struggle with it a little more. And to then try to turn around and fight like 3 months later, that seems like a bad idea for me. Not just for like brain health terms, but in terms of like wins and losses. Because right now, you look at Chucky Olives' record, he's only losing to really, really good fighters. If you try to come back too soon and you're not really there, you could really end up losing this one to Rafael Fiziev, which does not say he sucks or anything, but that's when people are going to start to look at you and be like, that's a man on the way down. So I think it's risky. And
Fiziev is obviously like a striker. Right. I think that if you're looking at it from like a sense of foreboding, I guess, or something like that, you think they could have, if they're going to do that, they might have booked him against somebody who might have been a little less of a threat that way to just knock him out again. But I think that was maybe the bigger surprise, other than maybe some of us might have thought that the Holloway fight might have been around the corner for Oliveira, something like that. So other than that, that was the big surprise to me. But I have to say, like you touched on it, the quick turnaround, especially in your mid-30s, I would love to see a stat to know like if this pans out for fighters. I feel like most of the time when we're having this kind of discussion, it happens again. It's one of those situations where you're like, oh man, that was too soon. He shouldn't have done that. It feels like we've had that kind of conversation more than like, hey man, look, he came back from 3 months being knocked out and look at him, he looked great. It's so rare that you see a guy bounce back from something that's kind of that traumatic, on your brain. And especially in Oliveira's case, where he's had a lot of battles, man. And like you said, he got knocked out worse in this one than he's ever been. That's a lot, man. It strikes me as a red flag. I hope it pans out, but that's a tough matchup. It's a tough draw against a guy I think who feels reborn again in the division, is getting a huge shot to kind of like leapfrog and put himself right back in there. And it's going to be I don't think I'm going to quite be watching through my hands like we always talk about Petesy, but it has a feel to it that's a little bit like, ooh, I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's well. Here's the thing. I was thinking, like, it seems to suit everyone more than it suits Charles. As in, it suits the UFC to have this guy headlining an event in Brazil. It suits Vizaya, like it's a massive opportunity for him. A huge, huge opportunity, and which Ben noted in his article, like this is like the biggest opportunity, biggest name he's probably ever fought. Gaethje being after that. But what do you think his management said about this, Chuck? Like, do you think like this comes across the table for Charlie, and they're immediately like, "Get on this one, mate. This is a huge opportunity. You got
Yeah.
to go over there and fight this
God, I
this
don't
guy
know.
coming up." Or do you think it's Oliveira just saying like, "I want
Sometimes
to
in
show these guys I'm still in the mix"?
And sometimes in MMA, it's just like, man, the handlers are the last line of reason, right? But I feel like sometimes in MMA, especially, they're just kind of like, where's the money, or
Yeah.
what's the best option right now? And they kind of roll with that. And I really don't know what they told him, but if I'm in his camp, and it's easy for me to say sitting here, but if I'm in his camp, I'm probably saying we need to think twice about this. My guess is that he wanted to fight in Brazil. The timing is, what it ends up being, and that's the opponent that's being offered. And they just said, you weigh that out, and you're like, I think we should do it. I feel fine, and obviously that's not the evidence has not showed that that's how it should work. But I really believe in boxing specifically. I know there's been bad boxing decisions too, all through the course of history, but in boxing specifically, I feel like there's a little bit more of a care for your fighter's longevity, or like just like examining tomorrow more than you would just the quick payday, that sort of thing. But I really don't know if they told him. Charles must have made a very convincing argument that he should be on that card, right? Like I feel like he wants to do it, and probably they cave into that point.
Yeah, I also think though part of the question, right, is where are you trying to go realistically in your career at this point as Charles Oliveira? Because is the goal to get back to the top and get another lightweight title fight? Because I got to tell you, as long as Ilia Topuria is the champion, with as one-sided as that fight was, that seems unlikely, right? Like it
Yeah.
seems, especially because you just have so many talented fighters at lightweight. So it seems tough to get back there and make a convincing case for another title shot when it's still the same champion. And if it's not going to be Ilia Topuria, I think a lot of us would think, hey, the guy who stands a good chance of coming back and getting the belt back would be Islam Makhachev, who he also has lost to. And so I guess what I would want to know is what do we see as the realistic options? What are we trying to do here? Because if we're trying to just sort of stay in the mix, stay as a capital G guy in the UFC's lightweight division, then okay, I guess it makes sense to fight somebody like Rafael Fiziev. But otherwise, it's like, are we trying to tell ourselves, hey, you get back in there quickly while people are still thinking about you, you win one big one on a fight card that you have to yourself where you get to be the main event, even if it's a fight night, and boom, we're right back in there. Because I don't really see that realistically as being possible. And you hate to keep bringing up the 35 and over curse in the lighter weight classes, but that is kind of a real thing. He's crested that hill at this point. And so I think that the conversation needs to be like, what are we actually trying to accomplish?
And 35, but in fight years, like he's been fighting since he was 2021, like he's been in there forever. Like the whole Dustin Poirier thing going way back in the day, like he's been in there for holds so many different records. It's a little different too when you're talking about a guy like that than a guy who has maybe 15 pro fights when he's got into the game late. So he's taken a lot of damage over the years, and I know Petesy, I know we've talked about this before, like with him, I think specifically you're waiting almost like you do with a Justin Gaethje or one of those type of guys where you're like, when is that moment where you're like, oh man, it's over? And
did it happen already?
Right. Or did it happen already? That's kind of the thing. And I think that this would almost reiterate that point, if nothing else. You know what I mean? Like if you went in there and got smashed in this fight, it would be like, okay, well, the Oliveira thing is probably done.
Yeah, this is just like as you guys are talking about, like we talk about miles on the clock more than we do what age are these guys. This is 46 professional fight. That's fucking
Wow.
That is some serious innings right there for Charles. And honestly, I think the fact that fans and media were kind of having those conversations about Max Holloway and kind of setting him up for one of those Dustin Poirier fights, like these are two guys that we really have so much respect for. And I know Max is chasing the title. Like he wants this rematch with Ilia at 155, even though he's been KO'd by him as well. But I think we're kind of setting ourselves up for as a feel-good fight. I know that sounds strange when two guys are bludgeoning each other, but like we had that feeling when Poirier fought Max Holloway. Like we were talking about afterwards, Chuck. We were watching these guys fight, just going like, Jesus, I love these guys.
Yeah.
Like both of them fighting, beating the piss out of each other. But like, this rules. Kind of wanted one of them, but it does feel like, Ben, I don't know, like it feels like a massive opportunity for Rafael here. Like this, like I don't know how he's getting such a great opportunity. Like other than fighting in Brazil, it does feel like a striker fighting a guy coming off such a nasty KO. This is a massive, massive deal for him, right?
Yeah, and you just look at like the opportunities he's gotten so far, because I do think he's one of those guys where he was putting together a really good run.
Yes.
And then we stopped and we kind of went, hey, he lost 3 fights in a row, man. Usually losing 3 fights in a row in the UFC means you're just about done. But then when you actually look at the fights themselves, 2 close ones against Justin Gaethje, and the one against Mateusz Gamrot where he hurt his knee. And so it's like, it looks bad on paper, but it's not as bad as all that in reality. And so he very well could come in here. While Charles Oliveira, still very, very popular. People love Charles Oliveira with good reason. He's a fun fighter to watch, has a fun personality. I still think he does not get enough credit for the just absolute style he will show up at a press conference. And you look at Charles Oliveira's outfits through the years, and man, it's
pimping.
Yeah, a lot, especially with a lot of these other guys. They're showing up in sweats. They're showing up, and like some of them are showing up in the fight kit with their name on it and everything. Like they look like somebody told them while they were sitting in the room watching Real Housewives on the hotel TV, and somebody was like, hey, that press conference starts in 15 minutes. And they're like, oh crap, let me get down there.
Yeah, no, true.
And Charles looks like he is going to see a film premiere that he is starring in, and I appreciate the hell out of it. So like he's got a lot of that stuff, like a lot of personality and style that people love. And so if you roll in there in Brazil and you beat that guy, especially if you're able to knock that guy out, and we're hungry for some fresh faces up there at lightweight. That big moments like that can really propel you up into the conversation, and people start to go, well, all right, like here's a guy who presents a little something different that we haven't seen the champion deal with yet. Maybe.
I feel like the UFC really likes Rafael too. Like even with the 3 losses, and remember on the last one, he fills in fairly late notice for Dan Hooker, and that's kind of a big buzzsaw to jump in front of. Even though you wanted to avenge that Gaethje loss, but to just jump in there and take that fight was kind of ballsy, man. But like you said, there were close fights. He had the knee injury, but they then tailor basically a fight card to him out in Azerbaijan, where he's basically. He is the kind of cult hero of the area, and like he goes into this situation, and he did work. I will say that he looked very good in that fight against Bahamondes, but now he gets this kind of situation. You wonder if the UFC feels it owes him a little something, or if there's something in play there for him to end up in this situation, or if they just think that he got a raw deal ultimately in the end, like, so they're not looking at those losses the same as Wikipedia does, just the pink. It's like I feel like they kind of favor him a little bit by putting him in this matchup.
Absolutely. A man who was favored in a matchup that will be taking place in Chicago next week is Khamzat Chimaev. A lot of people thought that DDP, might be reluctant to take this fight. We're going to have a little video here to give us an insight into how the champ is feeling about the task that's in front of him in the shape of the undefeated Chechen fighter next week in Chicago.
My request was, I asked the UFC, and I begged them, actually, I want to fight him either in Abu Dhabi, fight him in his neck of the woods, like I have been doing with so many other opponents. And, I've grown quite fond of that. So that's what I want to do. I want to fight Abu Dhabi, Saudi, or any of that region, anywhere in that region, fight him there in front of his own crowd, his people. And they said they want to do Chicago. They let me know a couple of weeks later, okay, they're going to do Chicago. And I thought, well, great. It's a place I haven't seen. It's great. And, for me, it really makes no difference where the fight is, to be honest.
Well, I mean, talking about bad motherfuckers, I mean, DDP, he's gearing up to make this man cry already, isn't he, Chuck? He just wanted to do it in front of his people. That's all.
I can appreciate it, and maybe we overblow this, like when we talk about guys like Chimaev. Like, I feel like sometimes in media mind and also in like just the general fans, like you build up this boogeyman, right? Like, and you're like, nobody wants to face this guy, man. He's going to go through everybody, and you kind of discount the competitor that's in some of these guys. And I feel like when I see a guy like DDP basically saying, I want to fight him, not I didn't want to just fight him. I wanted to fight him in his own backyard, you know. It's that Rocky IV vibe, right? Like where he's like, I'll go fight Drago out in Russia on Christmas Day. You know what I mean? Like he's going to go face him. I love that sort of setup. It always tells me something about the size of the competitor. And I think Du Plessis was talking about too, being just like a big Michael Jordan fan, right? Wasn't this and he was reading, he said he reads his books about his mindset. I mean, this is the problem when we were talking about John Jones recently. I was like, we were calling him the Michael Jordan of the sport for a long time, yet he didn't really have a mindset like Michael Jordan did. Where this guy, we don't give him the proper like respect in some ways as being a champion, even though he just keeps going in there and doing work. And yet he does have that mindset, and I can appreciate it, man. With each time he shows up for these fight cards, I feel like I get a better appreciation of that guy.
Yeah, I see. And I thought when he said that how he just wanted to see Chicago, I was thinking he wanted to go to the Art Institute. And
that's very nice. I've been there.
He heard, he heard they got them Van Goghs up in the Art Institute, and I thought that's why he wanted to go. But now the Michael Jordan thing makes a little sense. I mean, honestly, think about where he'll be if he goes out there and he beats Khamzat Chimaev, especially for a guy.
Yeah,
we've been looking at DDP for the last 2-3 years and going, okay, you won the last one, but surely you will lose the next one.
I know.
Like we refuse to believe that he's any good. He looks awkward. He looks stiff at times. We look at this guy and we keep being like, how do you keep winning fights? Because we feel deep down in our bones that you are not very good. And yet he keeps doing it. And like he will have, especially if he beats Khamzat here, he will have beaten in the course of like 1 year's time Sean Strickland, Israel Adesanya, and Khamzat Chimaev. And then if you go back even further, you add the win over Robert Whittaker, he'll basically have beaten anyone who got their hands on the UFC middleweight title at any point over the last like several years. You know, basically everyone since Anderson Silva, pretty much. That's incredible. Especially for a guy who we keep acting like we always think the next one is where he's going to be finally exposed. And we're doing it again here. You know we are. Like everybody's looking at this one and being like, all right, Khamzat going to smash you. Like he stylistically, he's a bad matchup for you. Like this is the one where the DDP train finally gets derailed. Is it though?
Yeah. You know what's funny is he is one of those dudes that you look at him and you see the opponent. Like you think about it in retrospect, well, the opponent. So it's like with Sean Strickland, well, Sean Strickland sucks, man. He should have never even been there. You know, when he fought Whittaker, well, you know, Whittaker is just long in the tooth now. Like he's always, you know, and then same with Izzy, right? Like it was just kind of always about the narrative being that he's catching these dudes and whatever. And, you know, it would probably happen here because you'd be like, oh, he got exposed. Khamzat got exposed. I mean, you know, it's one of those fighters for whatever reason that you like the narrative tends to go to the other guy, either being too old, washed, never was, or, you know, overrated. But I'm with you 100%. I think the real eye-opener was that Whittaker fight because he was a pretty big underdog, if I remember, going into that fight. And just seeing him, you know, go through Whittaker, who nobody had really done, you know, like in that kind of fashion, it told me like, okay, I've been underrating this guy. And so I feel like with each time you get a bigger appreciation, but you also just see that he's a much harder out than we understood, you know, because I think a lot of us, I used to say this a lot, like he looked to me, was it the Brunson fight? Like there was a fight where he goes forward. I said he was on like toddler legs going downhill. Like it looks like he's cumbersome. Has no control. Like, yeah, he cumbersome. Like he doesn't even have full control of his bodily motion sometimes, but somehow it packages, you know, into like something very hard to deal with, and like he's getting it done regardless. He's kind of like sharpened those tools. He no longer seems as reckless to me, which could be good or bad. It has to play out. But man, I just think that he's just perpetually unsung. It's very strange. But I hope if he does go through this one, to me, this would be fairly legendary in my mind. Like that's a big one because we've had this guy Khamzat forever, right? Like he felt inevitable for like the last 4 or 5 years. So for him to go through a guy like that, man, I'm not sleeping on DDP anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting talking about unsung. We have to refer to President Donald Trump getting Khamzat Chimaev into the US. First time in 3 years, Ben. I mean, this must fill your
Unsung.
heart with
That was sung.
This is amazing. We thought we would see the political arm of the UFC flexed. We have seen it once again. It's crazy. 3 years it took since that the fight against Holland, the one that went crazy, the Diaz Ferguson situation and all that. That's the last time we had him here. He's coming back. He doesn't seem completely clear on what's happening. I believe we have a quote here, don't we, on air, Jordan? From the great Khamzat. Everyone knows I didn't have the visa to the US. That's why I fought only once in Abu Dhabi. So now Donald Trump is here. We go for fights. That is as much of a clarification as I believe we will get on this. But yeah, interesting times for the UFC, having such a strong political leaning these days that they can make things happen like this in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, I also think that it was interesting. He also noted one of those quotes. I'm going to read this one where they were asking him like if he would maybe be one of the options to fight at this proposed White House event, where he said, "Look at my face. I don't think so. They would deport me to an immigrant camp or whatever. I'm an athlete
or whatever.
Spent all my life I've been training. Some people put me in a position like political shit and break my visa down, and I don't know why. I'm just doing for my family, fighting training. Athletes don't have to be with politics. I'm not connected." And
He's probably the most political guy going right now.
I have some sympathy for this, especially for like guys like the Chechen fighters, because I remember doing an interview with a fighter some years back where he was also held up as a guy where the Khamzat and Kadyrov would be out there posting pictures of him with this guy, like, hey, look, giving him stuff, posting him on social media. And clearly Kadyrov, you can see, was using the MMA team as a recruitment tool for his own sort of like private roaming militia to do all sorts of heinous stuff. And so we could very easily look at it and be like, this is bad. This is a bad guy. Why do you want to be palled up with this guy? And I was asking him some questions about like, hey, do you actually like this guy and support his politics or what? And his responses were very tepid. I feel like he was not critical, but he was not super enthusiastic about it. And then after we got off the phone, he didn't want to get offed. Exactly. Well, like his manager called me separately after we got off the phone and was like, hey, look, this is sensitive. Not only just because it's like he's out of Chechnya, but his family isn't. And if he is even seen as being insufficiently pro Kadyrov in something like this is the kind of thing that could put his family at risk. So be careful how you handle this. And I was just like, you know what? Fair enough. They're in a different situation. Somebody here where it's like they make the choice very much to align themselves politically. And we see, for the UFC, it works out because obviously we all knew, I think, that the UFC, part of the benefit of turning your pay-per-views into pro-Trump propaganda and just turning the volume up on that so much in recent months, the benefit to you should be that you could call up and be like, hey, we want to get this guy in the country, and they just go, no problem, and then, so it's not a surprise to me that it has worked out that way for Khamzat. I do think, though, Chuck, you in your column raised some good points about not only that aspect of it, but just that he has not been the most reliable or active guy for other reasons as well. You just don't, if he's champion, how much will we actually get to see him?
Yeah, that's to me, when I was thinking about it, and I don't know how you guys feel, I always feel like when you're talking about Khamzat, it started off like, oh man, he's going to fight every other week. This guy's going to be flying through everybody. But as time has gone on, it feels so hypothetical even when they book him. And I know that in some big spots too, like that's what you're mentioning is they put him in that first Saudi Arabia fight, which obviously we've been talking about the Saudi money and UFC finally getting involved, and they choose to put him on that card against Robert Whittaker. He falls off of that card, right? And he gets replaced by you know, a very capable opponent, but at the same time, like a guy that nobody is talking about. And I think that that was like a big blow. And then you look at like his task was obviously to do away with Nate Diaz, and I think that that drew a lot of, obviously, like everybody knew what was going on there, and it had a lot of eyeballs. And then that situation plays out where he's egregiously not going to make the weight. He's at a, you know, an emergency room and he doesn't go there. And then you take in, like, you know, traditionally it's just very difficult, like when the guys are observing Ramadan and those types of things, for timing to work out. And if you factor all of those types of things in, you're like, he may maintain one fight a year. Like, that's just kind of the fuss factor he brings to the table. He says he won't. Like, I think he believes that he'll be able to fight like a normal champion, but that is something the UFC has to consider. If this is truly the beginning, you know, next week, if it's the beginning of the Khamzat era, what does that look like? Are we going to bottleneck in that? You know what I mean? In that division, because he's not fighting enough. It's a legit thing you have to think about.
Yeah. No, you're all raising great points, and I've had a bit of an experience with that as well, with the Kadyrov stuff as well, Ben. Like, remember I interviewed a guy, he's, you know, many years ago, and he had been photographed in such a way, and he told me personally, he's like, so what do you think, we just don't react to that and that's fine? You know, like, do you think they you know, send you all this stuff and you just don't do anything and everyone's okay with that? You know, like, it's a very difficult situation. And even we had Artem Lobov on, well, Ariel had him on his show last week, and he was kind of explaining how when Zubaira Tukhogov shows up on Instagram with Ramzan Kadyrov and they're saying, when are you coming to Grozny to fight? He's like, well, you don't really not reply to it. You can't just go like, yeah, same old post, you know, you better get on there and you better acknowledge that this guy is talking to you. You know,
there was a time.
And you look at, like, there's parallels too in fight sports history. Like, Max Schmeling is kind of the classic example where the Nazis wanted to hold up Max Schmeling and be like, look, example of why the Aryan race is superior. He went over there, he knocked out Joe Louis. This proves absolutely everything we're saying. And Schmeling had said, you know, for years afterwards, and even like at the time, was saying to friends, like, I'm not down with this. I do not
So
agree
true.
with what they're doing. And he had been invited to have dinner with Hitler and had said no. And then maybe it was after he beat Joe Louis, the invitation came back a little stronger the next time. And he said later that, you know, somebody in his inner circle kind of told him, like, you can maybe refuse dinner with the Fuhrer once. You can't do it twice. And so he went and, like, allowed himself to be used that way, and regretted it later in life. You know, after World War II was over, he moved to the United States and worked for one of the big car companies in Detroit for most of the rest of his life, but always regretted the way he had allowed himself to be used there, but also realized I'm in a tough position.
Yeah. I mean, Bryce Mitchell would have welcomed this situation, Ben. Like, he could have found a nice fishing hole somewhere.
See, that's the difference. Is like, some people are out here being like, yes, please.
I know.
And other people are out here, you know, like the Simpsons meme, Smithers and the gun to the back, where they're just gritting their teeth and going like, yeah, I'm happy to be here.
I mean, in some, like, what was it, a few years ago? I guess it's been like 10 years ago when the Kadyrov, like, there was American fighters. I forget who all it was, but they're all showed up. Remember this? Like, it was
Weidman, Justin Gaethje,
Frank
was
Mir.
in them.
Frank Mir was there, yeah.
I remember
Frank
Justin
Mir,
Gaethje
yeah.
made the classic mistake afterwards, where, like, people were criticizing him on Twitter for having gone there, and he was saying, when did I ever go? And they're like, bro, we saw you. We saw the pictures. And he said, show me. And they showed him. And that's the mistake you make sometimes. You tell the internet to show you. It'll sometimes show you.
Jesus. Is it fair to say that, like, we're pretty excited for 319 though? I feel like some pay-per-views have come and gone this year, and we're kind of like, well, that happened, you know, that definitely happened. But I do feel like Chimaev, this countdown. I was shocked. I was reading your column today, Chuck, and I went on and I looked at his record. I'm shocked. 14-0 is all he is.
I know.
And considering, like, when he came in there, as you mentioned, that, like, 10 days just destroying two dudes or whatever it was, like 2 weeks. It was like he's going to fight every 2 weeks. And we're stuck on kind of 14-0 now. I am excited to see this. Like, there is a lot of reasons, like DDP, as you say, like this, there's a lot of guys tipping DDP. As we've said before, it's like fighting a wardrobe. Like, it's going to be very difficult for Chimaev to do some things he's done to other guys to DDP. Is it fair to say we've got a bit of a buzz on for this one, Chuck?
Yeah, I think so, man. I mean, this is partially, maybe it is the scarcity of it, but like the Chimaev thing, we've been impending on this for a long time. Like you just kind of wait to see for him, to get his big shot. Well, this is it. And he does have a very crazy aura when it comes to the fight game. I think he still carries that. We know it's BS because we've been in the fight game forever, but like to a casual audience, like the broader audience, the sheen of invincibility, where it's like people think that he's indestructible if you're paying attention, and he has been largely. And so like the big suspicion, right, is, well, what happens? And Ben has talked about this. We even talked about it a lot in the last when he was fighting Whitaker. You're like, well, Bobby Knuckles gets through that first round, maybe first round and a half, it turns into his fight. And I think that is still the suspicion. Obviously, Whitaker did not get through the first round, and his, 4 of his teeth ended up in the back. But it's like, so it's like you're in a situation now where you're like, okay, DDP, who's like this big momentum guy who I think is fairly strategic, in this sort of thing. What happens if he does? And I think that is a massive intrigue. Like when you have some, I guess, truth, people are waiting to be exposed or to see if it holds up. That's definitely in play for this fight. So it's a good one, man. I think it was one of those ones when they first make it, you just you put it away, and then as you keep revisiting it, you're like fairly fascinating, right? Like the more you think about the fight, the more it becomes more fascinating.
Yeah, and it's a good card overall, honestly, which is something we have not been able to say. Like when you look at it, I had the kind of shock of looking at the fight card recently and going, wait a minute, I know all these people. I know who
all
they
of
are.
them?
Like, yeah, like even as you go down the fight card, normally what we would be looking at is like, okay, you usually got a good main event, often a good co-main event. Is the main card filled out with fights between people we know, where stakes that we're familiar with, and we kind of know what we're doing here and why these fights matters. And this time you look down there and you go, yeah, I can tell you what is going on with every fight in the main card. What I'm not used to in this current age is being able to look down onto the prelims and start having the same kind of feel. You look, everybody got a Wikipedia page on this one, like you look all the way down. And you're just kind of like, yeah, like I get it. I get this feels like how it used to be, 8-9 years ago. And so like that is a bit of a surprise here.
There's been times you look at the names and it's not like you just don't even recognize the fighter, but you're like, wait a minute, is that a country? Like you read where they're from, you're like, is that real? Is that a made up place?
Or how many times have you looked at some of the pairings and been like, we haven't done this 3 times already?
I know.
Like
that is true.
It just feels like one of those fights in the division where you just kind of went like, yeah, all right. Like these guys
2
gotta
veterans
fight each other eventually. Yeah.
2 veterans on the Tapology that are like 46th and like 55th,
Yes, exactly.
It was Beneil Dariush and Renato Moicano. I believe that you were talking about that one, right? Ben, you were like, these guys this must be their quadrilogy at this stage.
I felt that way when I saw Mike Chiesa and Court McGee were going to fight.
Oh, yes.
And I was just like, we haven't done this a bunch of times?
Like you'd seen enough from both, though, at that point to be like, I know.
I get it.
You could have really easily got me to believe that, or even honestly, you could feel some way about where you see like Neil Magny and Easy Dos Santos fighting. I'm just like, if you told me that we were finally completing, the trilogy between these guys, I would believe that.
I mean, for Magny, it's like completing the whole welterweight picture. Like he's fought them all now at this point, right? Like it's filled it like a bingo card. But I do think that like having guys like Aaron Pico, like we've talked about this before when they had Pitbull. Like you get a guy like that who comes over, especially at 28 years old, who we'd followed for so long as a kind of a blue chip prospect originally, one of the faces. Like back then, I remember how what a big deal that was when Bellator signed him, because they were kind of stockpiling these collegiate wrestlers, these really decorated wrestlers, and putting them in there like this is the smart way to go about business. He loses that first fight ever against is at Madison Square Garden against Zach Freeman, and from that point on, I feel like he's kind of lost some of the, that whatever it was that he came in there with. But he's persevered and he's won a lot of fights and he was on a good roll. I think you put him on a fight card like this, it would have been a lot of fun to see in the Evelev fight. But I think that Lerone Murphy, given where he's at, is very similar. A guy that isn't, they're not quite lifting up to the title, but they're kind of making it hard for him to get there, and they put Aaron Pico in there. That's a fun fight. You know what I mean? Absolutely. So you get that. I think that's a good co-main event. And then, guys like Page and others like that. I just feel like there's good bang for your buck on the pay-per-view.
Absolutely. No, without a doubt. on the latest episode of retirements that we didn't see being reversed. We got Artem Lobov stepping out, guys, after a long time on the sidelines. He was on Ariel's show this week, and I do know Artem very well. I've covered him since he very early on in his pro career. Honestly, he said to me that he was coming back, and I was like, I don't know if that's a good idea, buddy. And he was like, well, I've already signed the contract. And I was like, well, that's a very Russian Hammer thing to say.
Yeah.
I gotta say, the big takeaway from me from this interview is like, you know, he's still got that personality. Like, I mean, obviously, Artem is not going to be celebrated for his record. You know, people aren't going to be like, well, like, look at this. Like, he has always brought something to the fight game, though. And the amount of phone calls I got the day after this interview was pretty crazy. But it's interesting that when this legal thing started with Conor was obviously, he was in his voice memo on X era at the time, and he was giving a lot of, he was saying a lot of things about Artem, and it felt like it was a lot of losses, like, you know, public perception losses for Artem back to back to back. Man, he went on Ariel's show, and as he's saying this stuff, I'm kind of like, I don't know how Artem's legal team are going to feel about him telling him every aspect of the situation. But looking through the comments and looking at the live chat, I feel like he's really turned people around here. Like, I felt like as I was watching it, a lot of people were suddenly like, Jesus, it sounds like Artem's had a rough old time with this situation. He's also, he is going to fight Zubaira Tukhogov, the person we were referring to earlier with the Ramzan Kadyrov Instagram posts on October 3rd. That is about 7 years after we were initially meant to fight. It also seems to be, as far as Khabib has said, as far as Artem said in the interview, it seems that there is a very strong possibility that we will be finally getting the Paul Hughes rematch against champion Usman Nurmagomedov. It has not been confirmed yet, but seems like a good old card. And I was just wondering, like, were you shocked by this at all, Chuck? Like the return of the Hammer seemingly out of nowhere?
Not shocked. I mean, like most of these guys, you know, there would only be a couple guys that would actually shock me. Khabib himself was like, okay, I'm coming back. I would be a little shocked just because of we've talked about how principled he is in his decision and all this, but not really. I think that, you know, what is Artem? Is like 30. He's in his late 30s. He's not like he's 39. Some of these. What is he? 39?
Yeah,
something like that. So I mean, that's obviously an upper age there, but like some guys do this and they're in their 40s, and like Pacquiao just did, and you're like, man, are you sure you want to do this? I feel like he probably is okay to go in here. You mentioned him being kind of you know, turning the sentiment. How much of that though is like just McGregor going the opposite way? Because I think when this stuff was first happening, it was McGregor was still, you know, still held, I think, 75, 80, 85% in a positive light. Like most people still were seeing him as Conor McGregor. I don't think that you know, so like all the things that have happened subsequently, like just within that string of time, like have just been such a, you know, a disaster for Conor McGregor that I feel like the sentiment it almost has to switch, doesn't it? Like, you know
yeah,
what I mean?
you know, that's what I was thinking too, because it's like if you're on the opposite side of Conor McGregor, at a certain point we go, that must mean that you're okay.
I call it the Paul Hughes effect. I call it the Paul Hughes effect.
Yeah, exactly. Though it's true.
You actually have a column up about retirement. Was this week's mailbag, Ben? But I'm wondering, as far as Chuck has referenced Khabib, you had said, I believe, a couple of weeks ago that you'd put Poirier in the same league as Khabib in terms of retirements, like how much you believe them to be true. Is this still the feeling you have
about Poirier? Yeah, I mean, I think we were talking about on the spectrum where you have Khabib on one end and you have John Jones on the other.
Yes, that's right.
Who's retirement?
That is literally both. That is the extreme of both sides. Yes,
and I do think that Poirier is still way more on the Khabib end of the spectrum than the John Jones, just because I think that it's, for me, when you see people where fighting has become so much of their identity and it's all they really have. I mean, financial concerns will obviously make some people think twice about it, but for the people who that's not the thing that's going to get them back in the cage, I do think one of the things that does get them back in the cage sometimes is they don't have anything else in their life and they don't know who they are, without this. And I've heard so many fighters, I've talked to so many fighters over the years who have dealt with the difficult parts of retirement, both those who did stay retired and those who didn't, where they talk about how you go through an identity crisis because you used to be known as so-and-so the fighter. And it's not the same to be known as so-and-so who used to be a fighter.
Right.
People don't treat you the same. And, you know, Chael Sonnen, I remember talking about how the hardest part for him was he realized how much of his social life was the gym. Going down there to the gym, being with the guys, you know, not just the training and the working out, but that, you know, you train, you work out, and then you stand around on the mats and you bullshit for 20, 30 minutes before you get in the car and go home. And then you don't realize at the time, you take that for granted. This is time with your friends. This is like a necessary social outlet that you have. And it's not like you can't go to the gym and train afterwards, but I also remember talking to Julie Kedzie about this, where she was saying right after she retired, she's still at the gym. She was working still at Greg Jackson's gym and was training with everybody. But she said she kind of looked over on the mats one day and saw all the women who were on the fight team, and they're all sitting in a circle after practice talking with each other, you know, talking about what they'd just been doing in practice and sparring and whatnot. And it kind of hit her like, I'm still here, but I'm on the outside of that. And she felt that very clearly. And it was like, okay, here's a moment where it really hits home. And I think that for a lot of people, if they can't find something else, if they can't figure out who they are without that, they're way more likely to come back, just because it feels like such a void that they never learn how to fill. I don't feel like Dustin Poirier is one of those guys who's going to have that problem. He seems like a pretty fully developed human being just in general. And so that's what makes me think that. And plus, he's smart. He's smart enough and been in this game long enough to know, if you come back, what would they do with you?
Right.
What would the UFC think you were good for? And do you want to be that for them? And I think he would realize the answer is no.
Yeah, I mean, he was always like, do I have to start again? Like, he kind of understood, you know, the like almost Sisyphus type thing where you're like, I've already pushed it up there and it keeps rolling. I can't do it again. I'm not going to do all that. And I think that it's one of those, like, he also just seems like such a non-bullshit type of guy. Like, if he's out of, he's out of. He has other things going on. You were talking about that though, man, and I was like, that is so true. Like, the social lives that you think about, like the old boxers, because before there was MMA, and I know, Ben, you like the old boxing history. A lot of those dudes, like, they were just so associated to their towns and to their, you know, to their gyms, and they became like these staples. So what did they do? They ended up like opening bars, or they did something. They had to just be with their name, but it was such a shift even for them. Or they'd be rolled out at every like little pageant or whatever it is. People would get, you know, here's Joe Louis or whatever it is for every single event around the area. And I think those days are kind of gone. Like, I don't really think MMA has that same kind of appeal. I think there's too many fighters. It's too ubiquitous. People have too many social, like the social handles, and the social media changes so much of the mystique of what happens in the game and all that stuff. So you hear it all the time, man. Like, guys they're so regimented. They go to the gym and they do all this stuff. And once you stop that, you're like, what am I? Like, a little time goes by and you're like, what am I doing? I need to do something. I'm not doing what I was doing. They lose that sense of identity goes away.
It's a strong argument for fighters opening restaurants, like Jack Dempsey did. I mean, and that was something where, like, people would talk about that later, where it was just like part of the appeal of Jack Dempsey's restaurant in Manhattan was that you could go there and Jack Dempsey probably going to be there.
I know.
You know, like,
tell you stories and stuff.
At some point he's going to show up. He's going to walk through the crowd. He's going to shake hands. He's going to go around, and so it's like. That was something, you know, and other boxers who I read would even sort of like look down on that a little bit. They're like, they're putting him in the window, like, you know, like a mannequin to kind of like beckon you over. But like, there is something to like, he still gets to be Jack Dempsey that way, and it still holds an appeal. Maybe this is what we need. Like, you know,
used to hear stories about people
sports bar.
Yeah, well, I mean, they should, but like, you used to hear stories about Sugar Ray Robinson, like, you know, driving by his place in Harlem. If the pink Cadillac was out there, man, you knew business was booming over there at that moment. He was there. Yeah,
remember, like, even I think Lewis ended up being like a professional greeter at one of the casinos in Las Vegas. Like, that's not. It's. I heard.
There's a much sadder story, by the way, of Jake LaMotta turning out to be a bouncer at a strip club, and him kind of fulfilling the same sort of role. And he was one of those guys, though, that looked down at. He was like, "Oh, Jack Dempsey, look at like what they're selling here. I know what we're selling. We're selling tits."
Fair play. Jake LaMotta
never goes out of demand either, you know.
Another classic quote from the Raging Bull. I was saying it, like, I heard I know it's a different thing. It's not a combat sport. But I heard Peter Schmeichel, a famous Danish goalkeeper, real stoic guy, and I didn't really expect him to say something really profound about retirement. And he said, as an athlete, you die twice. And I was like, oh shit. And he was like, I had to the athlete version of Peter Schmeichel died, and I had to make peace with that over a number of years before I could become Peter Schmeichel the human again. And I was like, what the fuck did you just say?
Makes
Peter
sense though.
Schmeichel? But it's very profound. I thought, like, to hear this very stoic, doesn't say a lot of things. This guy just coming out with this piece of poetry in the middle of this interview. I was like, whoa, that is fucking wasn't ready for that one, Pete.
I also think that part of it for a lot of people is, and I've heard so many fighters say this, is they're like, while you're fighting, you don't have to ever ask yourself, what am I doing? You know what you're doing. Like, you're waking up every day and you're trying to be a better fighter. And when you have a fight signed, you're waking up every day and you're going, the goal of today is to take one step further in the project of beating this guy on, August 19th or whatever it is.
Yeah, there's always an anchored date that you're going towards. Yep.
And you get to live your life in these kind of manageable chunks. And at the end of that, there's going to be a pass-fail test where it hurts a lot to lose, feels great to win, but either way, you're going to kind of get a finality and an answer. And then you're going to get to start with the next one. And life in general does not offer us that much, those kinds of situations. It does not give you these like easy, like, yes or no, you did it or you didn't, try again. Like it's just kind of ongoing and open-ended. And that's a tougher thing to deal with, especially if you have to wake up and be like, so what am I doing today? What am I doing with the next 10 years? That I think is a tougher adjustment for a lot of people, because even when you felt like training camp was terrible and you didn't want to get up and go to the gym and you're beating yourself down, at least you knew what I'm doing. Like that question is answered for you. And when you take that away, a lot of people kind of get unmoored, and it's understandable.
I remember even like a number of fighters have said this to me, just on that point, what you're saying, when you have something you're gearing your life towards. Guys can win a fight and be morbidly depressed in the aftermath of it because they don't have that guiding light in their life. So it's it is.
Remember Volkanovski? That was like when he was like, he kind of pointed this out as an active fighter, like, and this is why he was saying yes and staying active is because he didn't want those idle moments creeping into his life. He didn't want to have those contemplations, that tells you a lot, right? And I think that there are more Volkanovskis out there than we realize.
It also suggests maybe not, like, I don't know how long you can just run from it, like how long you can just fill the hours. But I don't know. I'm sure you guys can relate to this too. You ever have like a story you're working on that takes a long time, that you're tracking down sources, you're tracking down information, you're really working on it for a long time, and you get really into it, you get really engrossed in it, and it's stressful, like trying to finish it by the deadline, trying to get it out. You get it out, you publish it, people say good job or you suck or whatever. But then you feel a little bit of an emptiness because you were like, I didn't realize how much like this was a thing that I had that I was looking forward to, and now it's over and I got to find another one, and there's sort of like an emptiness after that. And especially if it's like your entire identity is tied up in that thing, and that's how other people know you, and sometimes it feels like are they being nice to you because they like you, or are they being nice to you because they want to be friends with the fighter who's on TV? And you take all that away kind of suddenly, and that could be a big adjustment.
That's true of authors a lot. You hear that, where they're writing a book for years, like it takes them a long time, and then once it's finally done, there's this feeling of bereft, like what now, because they've been carrying it. And I also think that like there's something about putting yourself through hell, that you emerge on the other side that it gives you that euphoria on the other end where you're like, I did it though. I did this whole thing. And I think that that's just a common cycle, a cycle for fighters to go through it. A lot of times they're happy even in losses because they went through it. You know what I mean? Like they gave it their all or whatever. They still get that reward at the end.
Yeah. We had John S. Nash on last week. While you were off gallivanting, Ben. He was speaking. He was speaking about the amendment that TKO boxing. I believe Luke Thomas has called it a bespoke piece of legislation that TKO Boxing are trying to usher through for their new UBO, baby, the Unified Boxing Organization. But listen, maybe we got things wrong because TKO have come out and they've smoothed over some misconceptions.
Oh yeah, what'd they say?
Oh, here we go.
The fox should be allowed in the hen house, says Fox.
What we are proposing is adding some additional language to this legislation that will allow for what I'll call UFC-style unified organizations for the promotion of boxing events. So there you go, Chuck, okay? Calm the fuck down. Everything's okay. We haven't heard from you folks. Tell us how you feel about this whole misadventure.
I mean, to quote one of my favorite movies of the last like 10 or 15 years, Bridge of Spies, which one of those movies.
Damn, I thought it was going to be Showgirls. Go ahead.
Terrible title, great movie. He would say that if it were true and also if it were not. You know, that's what he's going to say there. But also, like, especially the framing that he's trying to add is like, hey, we're not undercutting this legislation. We're not taking away anything of it. We're just adding to it. But what you are adding to it is something that allows you to do something that you couldn't previously do. So it's like you're trying to act like we're diminishing this at all, except that you are. Like you're adding language that say you specifically can do the exact thing you want to do that this legislation would have stopped you from doing before. And I understand why they want to do it. I also think that it's a little bit, it kind of tells you where we are just generally, because they just came out of this antitrust lawsuit, right? Where you're accused of trying to own an entire sport and make it so that nobody else can enter and compete. You settled that lawsuit, you come right out of it, and then you kind of are looking around going, what other sport could we do this to? Like, what other sport could we go and do this in? And you're looking at boxing as an example of like, maybe we could take over that one next. Like, that's obviously what they would like to do. And sure, they're going to say this stuff about like the legislation, about, hey, it's not as bad as you guys think. But it's also like the same thing I asked when they kept talking, sort of dipping their toe in the water earlier and saying, might have to do something about the Ali Act. And it's just like, what does it say about what you want to do if the legislation put in place to protect fighters stops you from getting involved in the sport? Like it seems obvious to me that what they're doing is they're just being like, all this, like all these years where MMA fighters wanted to go to boxing, boxers didn't want to come to MMA, and there's a reason. And the reason was just like boxers enjoy a lot more freedom. The money at the top is so much better. You go to some of those championship boxers and be like, hey, would you like to sign on for 6 fights with the UFC? They get to veto anything else you do. And they also keep almost all of the money. Like, no, that's a bad deal compared to what they were getting. And now they want to bring that to boxing. So yeah, you're going to say all this stuff like, oh no, it's fine. The sheep, the wolf in sheep's clothing is just going to just here to graze like the rest of you. Nothing to see here, but it's obvious like what they're doing, I think.
I thought that the boxers didn't want to come over because of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, that was what I heard. They were afraid.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
I mean, hey, if you were going to pay them $25 million to come over here and have to deal with a triangle choke, they're putting on that gi, man. Like that wasn't the issue.
It's interesting just watching the discourse around this, because it feels like boxing isn't bracing itself in the way that MMA feels it should. I'm reading a lot of reports where it's like the MMA Fighters Association, those guys are coming through and they're gonna be like, you need to get ready for it. Like, this is not a joke. Like, this is gonna change everything about your sport. They're gonna try and monopolize boxing. You guys have a pretty good situation here. I can't remember where. I think Eric McGracken was talking about it, who does great work on this, the legal kind of stuff around MMA. I think he was talking about like the mic being wrestled off people who are trying to speak about this at a conference recently. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, it feels like everybody in this sport kind of knows what they're trying to do, but boxing is kind of embracing it. Not embracing it, but allowing it. And I remember when this first came out that Turki Al-Sheikh was joining forces with Dana White and they were going to take over boxing. And I was like, there's no way it's going to be this easy. Like Hearn, Warren, all these guys are going to stand up. And look, they are saying things, but what's crazy to me is it seems like even though they're saying things, it still feels as though they're going to be allowed to walk right through this door and at least have an attempt at taking over this sport completely. Am I being a complete catastrophizer feeling this way, Joe?
I don't know, man. But do you sometimes think that like like, are we talking about like sometimes fans' perceptions too about like you don't know what's coming your way, you don't understand? Like, I feel like we've been more intertwined, I guess, with the UFC's politics and the way they've handled business than boxing fans are to their sport. It's very strange, and I don't know if it's just because the barrier of entry is just very different for boxing. Obviously, the different sanctioning bodies, like the Ali Act, does complicate it because now you have a lot of you have four major titles, you have different weight classes, and sometimes I feel like it's within that chaos of the way just the structure or the lack thereof, the people are like, well, it might simplify things. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like sometimes they just look at it as simple as that. Like, well, it could make it, UFC's kind of easier to follow in this sense. You know what I mean? Or you get the fights you want because of this. I wonder if that plays a factor in this. But in some point, I think that just the general chaos that people are used to dealing in boxing does play a role in all of that.
Yeah, if you could only shop at the company store, that would also simplify things, wouldn't it?
It would.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see it play out. It feels a bit messy at the moment, and I think it will continue to be. And before we move on to talk about this week's action, we had a bit of a conversation about Topology's new ranking system on the Ariel Helwani show. Ben, folks, feverishly trying to get in the mix as we
didn't have a hotline to call. That's a
you need a call-in number. You need a call-in number so I can be like, we're going to Ben from Missoula who has something.
Shut the fuck up, Petesy. Shut the fuck up. That's how you say it.
Well, dude, you used to call in all the time. Like, didn't you on the MMA hour back in the day? I felt like you did. I remember one time you were like in a tunnel. I'm in a tunnel. I'm in the. You remember that?
I remember that too. Yeah.
Tell us, Ben. Were we too harsh on Topology's new attempt? We didn't quite like the 205 rankings. We really didn't like the welterweight rankings. And, well, we really got pissed off about the lightweight rankings, given that Islam Makhachev wasn't ranked number 1. Please correct the course.
Well, I mean, for one thing, some of the stuff that I found out in talking to Gregory Sachs from Topology about just like how they're doing it, I do appreciate that they just do champion of the division as number 1. Yeah. Like the way the UFC does, where it's just like you get the C at the top for like a champion, and then somebody else can say, I'm the number 1 guy in the division, but you're not the champion. So how does that supposed to work? And I understand why they like to do it that way, because one thing gives you 16 people in the top 15. But also that it allows you to bump everybody's numbers up and put a number 1 next to somebody's name when they're fighting for the title. Makes it really look like it's, whether it really is or not, number 1 versus number 2 in the division. But it's interesting to me. I appreciate what they're trying to do in terms of just sort of taking vibes out of the equation, because we've seen we're highly susceptible to vibes in this sport.
We like
you go out there, you win a fight, you look really good doing it. We get very excited about you by Monday, and we're like, this guy's a rocket ship to the top.
Is he the greatest ever?
Yeah,
he's the greatest ever.
Whatever we saw last, it really sticks with us. And I appreciate an effort to kind of take that out of it and to make it into an automated system. The problem, or like the challenge, I guess, is when you're trying to make an automated system for a sport like this, where there's only so many actual inputs, like data inputs you can have in terms of just like wins, losses, what round you won in, what your method of victory was, who you beat, who they beat. You're trying to sort of like get a picture based on that. And one thing he said to me that I felt was important to note, because I was asking, hey, what about some of these fights we've seen where guy loses, but he was in a tough fight that we didn't expect. We expected him to get blown out. He didn't get blown out. He went to a decision. He looked good. He had some moments. We even felt like, hey, if there were 2 more rounds, maybe he would have won. Can the computer, can the automated system, the algorithm account for that? And he was basically like, no, the computer, the algorithm doesn't watch the fights. It can't really do that. And so there are going to be those kinds of problems in it. Like where do you put the weight? What means what? And I think a good example of how this could affect things is where you saw, Tatsuro Taira's fight, where he was essentially put in a fight where no matter what he did, the algorithm was not going to move him up. And you can argue about that, like, is that right or not? Because he's fighting a short notice opponent who's ranked way down, and he looked really good in the fight.
UFC, right?
But like, doesn't matter what you do if you're in that situation. you go out there, if you levitate across the cage, kick him in his head, and his head explodes. Yeah, like the algorithm doesn't see that, and so it's just going to be like
at the nuance. Yeah,
you beat the guy you were supposed to beat, and you were supposed to beat him easily, and you did. There was no way for you to move up in that system, and so like I do think that that's going to be a challenge for something. And like one of the reasons they talked about the model that they use for chess and tennis and stuff. And one of the reasons that it works for that is because there's so many more competitions. There's so much more data to use. And MMA fighters, you know, you have 5 fights in the UFC. That could be your entire career in the UFC. And often it's not even that many. So it's like you have to find a way to try to do this without having as much to draw from. And I do think that that's always going to be tricky. To me, the most interesting thing about it is not just looking at the top 10. Because you're right, you can look at the top 10 of some of those divisions and be like, what's going on here? And the only way to know that your algorithm is working properly is to look at what it spits out and go, does this seem right based on what our preconceived idea of what the ranking should be? But to me, the most interesting part is that it ranks every single fighter in the UFC. Because there's some of those guys right now where all they know is that they're not in the top 15.
Right. This is the thing, yes.
Yeah, like they know they're out there somewhere.
Yeah, they probably think they're around 20, like
right. Yeah, I'm sure
everyone thinks they're around 20.
I'm sure, like especially in a division where you look at like lightweight or something, where there's like 70, 80 people or whatever, maybe like 90 something people. And it also shows you how many fighters there are in some divisions and how few there are. There's like 28 women's bantamweights or something, but there are probably 30 people at lightweight who think I'm somewhere between 16 and 25. And one or two wins, and I'm right there. And I do think it'll be interesting to see how some of those guys, once they can see it, and especially the UFC comes to you and be like, we want you to fight this guy. Neither one of you are ranked. You both lost your last fight. What do you think? And they might before have looked at it and been like, yeah, sure, that makes sense. And now if you look at it,
right,
you're 29th. And he's 45th in the Tapology like automated rankings. You go, no way. That's I got nothing to gain from this. And I mean, again, I'd love to be a fly on the wall.
Unless you're Chris Duncan.
Yeah,
did it last week, baby. Come on, Chris. Sorry, guys.
If you're a fly on the wall for the UFC negotiations where somebody says, hey, we want you to take this fight, and somebody tries to reference the Tapology automated rankings for a reason why they won't take it, man, Sean Shelby is going to reach through the phone and strangle you. So, like it's not going to.
That's going to happen. You know, it's going to happen. But you pointed out like Jeremy Stevens. I forget what number he was, like 83rd or something like that. And you're like, oh my god, what a slap in the face that must have been.
And like if you're, he's somebody where like Chad Dundas pointed this out to me when we were doing the co-main event this week, where he was like, the UFC just seems to like him. Dana seems to like him. So it's like for the UFC's perception, if he went out there and knocked a couple of people out, they'd be like, all right, Jeremy Stevens, he's
for
freight train from hell. And even though the rankings wouldn't tell you that. And so like I also think it could be interesting for fans, especially with some of these absolute dog poop fight night events at the Apex, where you're looking at some of these fights and you're going, what even are we doing? Why would I watch? And like, if they give you something where they say, hey, this one is number 41 versus number 43. We're seeing who could break into the 30s here, you guys. Like, at least that's something. At least it gives you some kind of context to like understand what we're even doing.
I will say that in my defense, for my large panning of the Tapology situation, isn't that what rankings are for? Isn't it for us all to sit around and be like, this is fucking
well, it should be.
Yeah. That is the beauty of a ranking system. So Tapology, I was just christening the new rankings with some derogatory noises directed at the situation. I did say I think it's great. It's an innovation. I think that is what we want to see as media members, as fans, as people who consume the sport. Innovation is the key. So Tapology, I think it's great.
Well, you know, and that one of the things I asked him was, I was like, are you concerned that, because you're right, people, that's what rankings are for, is we want to argue about them. That's why MMA websites love them, because it's good engagement bait. And
especially the pound for pound. You know about that.
And they love to get mad at you for if your rankings are wrong according to them. And I was like, do you think it'll be less fun for people to argue with an algorithm? And he was like, our experience running this website has been that there is never a shortage of people who want to send you an angry email. Like, that is not our concern. That people will get to a point where they will stop being mad. Like, there's the
especially,
wellspring of
especially
anger.
in our sport. Like,
Oh yeah, you're so fucking. Hey,
Yeah.
Ben mentioned dog shit Apex cards. Roman
I said dog
Dolidze
poop.
is right.
Dog poop is what I said.
Sorry,
You did say.
Excuse me. I mean, excuse me. I didn't realize. But this weekend's card at the Apex is Dolidze v Fluffy Hernandez at the top of it, and I believe you spoke to Mr. Roman Dolidze.
Sure.
Chuck, tell me, how did it go? He's a big hairy man, and he scares the piss out of me.
He's weird because he's like, he looks that way, but he's a super nice guy, you know, like he's very, very nice, almost too nice. Like I pointed this out in the piece where I was like, you're probably too nice to like automatically, you know, climb up the rankings. I was a little bit surprised, honestly, that he's as big of an underdog as he is. I think he's almost like a 3-1 underdog in this fight with Fluffy, but it's kind of lost, obviously, because we're talking. I mean, I've got a Khamzat thing that ran today. We're kind of jumping right through this fight card and looking at UFC 319. It only makes sense, but I do think that, like, you know, these are two guys who should be like. I know that the Dolidze is 37 years old. His window is closing. If he loses this fight, it might just close. But Fluffy, I mean, like the dude has won a ton of fights, and he should be kind of like climbing towards those guys that are fighting next week. So I feel like it actually has some stakes. They may not be as obvious, but you're probably talking top 5, right? Like you're talking about kind of leaping into that space. So at least the fight at the very top of this card is worthwhile, I think.
Yeah, it is a decent card. We've also got this weekend. It's not the busiest week. There's PFL second event in Johannesburg is going down. I think that is a PFL Africa card, so region specific. They did the first one on the undercard of that Eblin v Koslov and Stenis card, so they'll do another one of them. And Octagon, a lot of people absolutely freaking the fuck out about Octagon over here. They're doing all those outdoor venues. They're basically they're an Eastern European promotion, but they're kind of a rival of KSW, and they're doing very KSW shit. The production is really, really great. The events are huge. As I say, this one's an outdoor arena. So I guess my point is, if you're looking for an entry into Octagon, it might be this weekend as a good choice, because there's a middleweight tournament taking place, and there's also the women's bantamweight title fight taking place. I think it's at some tennis court. There's going to be tens of thousands of people there, I'd imagine. So maybe you guys want to check that out. But yeah, that's pretty much all we've got this week, my friends. It has been lovely having the beautiful Ben Fowlkes back. I mean, his arms are intimidating me through the screen as we speak. he isn't wearing any there's no graphic on his t-shirt whatsoever, so at least he spared us this. I didn't want Jordan being like, oh, he dressed so cool, oh, look how cool this guy is, he's stronger than you, he's better than you at everything. PT, go and fuck yourself. But I'm so happy to have you back, Ben. That was
vacation mode. That was Ben in vacation mode, wandering the streets of New York covered in sunblock. So like now,
he hates summer, by the way. Don't get into it.
Man, hey, you're sitting around in New York. It reminds me why I'm glad I don't live there anymore.
New York sucks in the summer. It really does.
Just sweating constantly.
Yeah. You need one of those busted fire hydrants you can run through
where
Hell's
the fuck
Kitchen.
were they when I was there? That was fucking crazy. Ask Chuck, man. I was pissing sweat. Like I had 3 t-shirts a day I was going through. I was just fucking covered. It felt like I was back in the fucking Middle East. Honestly, it was fucking crazy. Yeah. But lads, it's a pleasure to have you all back. Chuck is actually doing his yearly, and you know about this, Ben, because you know Chuck a long time. He does his hat vacation next, when he goes and picks the hats for the next 12 months, and he gets one for every day.
It's like some people have like a fishing time when all the there's hats, there's like new lines of hats, and I go pick them out this coming week. Yep.
He looks at prototypes and whatnot. So it's just me and you next week, I think, Ben, if Chuck's not around. If you'd be so kind to grace us with your presence again, that is.
I'm not going anywhere ever again. That's my
Come
plan.
on.
He says that. But we know how Ben is. Like all of a sudden he'll be like, I'm heading out. Chad was talking about this, right? Like he just kind of disappears without any notice. So we can't take him at his word.
I'll admit I could do a better job of letting people know in advance, because it's one of those things where you book the tickets and then I kind of look up and I go, oh shit, sorry, I'm leaving tomorrow.
It was so funny. I did the show with Chad, man. It was so funny just getting me some Ben intel. Absolutely fantastic stuff. Got a new cat as well. I really should have brought this up at the top of the show. Mick is a new cat, right?
Oh no, Mick's been down for a long time. So.
Oh, I thought you were introducing Mick to the world there with the posing with Carl the dog. So
no, Mick now he gets birthday cards from listeners of the Co-Main Event podcast every year. So
wow.
People appreciate him.
It's a beautiful thing. Reggie still dueling Jasper as we speak. He is staring him down from all different parts of the house. It's quite a saga that's happening here. But listen, we hope you all have a lovely weekend. You go.
There it is.
Yep. Every time.
I thought we were out, boys.
Oh, man.
Fucking hell. Jesse Orozco 98. Do you guys notice similarities between Zuffa entering MMA v entering boxing? Both times have influence with regulatory bodies.
Oh,
Both times having influence.
Sorry. That's a good point, actually, because it's like a lot of the youngsters don't remember how that Zuffa was not the original owner of the UFC, and that Lorenzo Fertitta was on the Nevada State Athletic Commission and so it was just like they were in a position to do things to the old UFC ownership that would make them motivated sellers, let's say, and then could say like, oh, you decided to put this on the market? Well, don't mind if I do. But also like you could point to like, where Mark Ratner, who used to work for the Nevada State Athletic Commission and then decided like go over and work the other side of the street, working for the UFC for many, many years now. So it's like there was a very blurry line there between like regulator and promoter. And so it does seem like there's a certain playbook that they have in mind, and it doesn't seem like they ever want to show up and just be one of the players in a sport. It seems like they want to show up and take over. And yeah. I guess that's capitalism for you.
Not here to take part, you might say.
Yeah, exactly.
They start with the programming. They go to the back of the computer and fix all the settings, and then
when was the John McCain thing? Was that early days?
That was in
90s. That was early days.
That was human cockfighting era.
Yeah.
Yep.
One of my favorite times.
That was fun.
What do we got? PC, that's my name. I'd like to submit a formal complaint that you aren't a part of the Boys in the Back show. Save the all-day Guinness guzzling for the weekend. I mean, I was telling on air, Jordan, not a single beer I had since I returned to the Emerald Isle. I mean,
is that right?
It just broke me. You know what I mean? unless I'm forgetting something. I don't think I am though. I mean, my life's pretty shit at the moment. But
that's usually why you drink. I mean,
yeah. I mean, there's a wedding coming up on Tuesday, and I think I'm gonna have to bust out some fucking serious drinking then. And then when they all start singing, I can cry and pretend.
You have a lot of weddings, man. You're in that wheelhouse, I guess.
Oh man, it's a fucking it's a big one. This is gonna be a cool one. With my friend Tina. She is a yoga teacher. She is a hippie. It's gonna be fantastic. So I'm gonna really enjoy it. But I think I'll have about like 12 Guinness, and then when everyone starts singing later about the old country, I can start weeping.
30,000 calories worth of Guinness.
I'll just fast for the next 2 days afterwards. I swear to God, I won't spend like 50 quid on various takeaways because I'm just wallowing in my shame. But I'm gonna get off the bench again. I think I proved Jordan that hadn't drank in a long time before New York either, but when it calls, it's in me. It's in me to put away a lot of fucking beer at the drop of a hat, and I'm very proud of that.
True.
You're saying, like John Jones, you think you still retain the ability to pop out and show him?
Yeah, exactly. There's no fucking Tom Aspinall coming for me in America, I'll tell you that much. Is that it? What have we got? Oh, shit. Sammy, perfect ending to a great week. Great show, gents. I mean, I'm actually noticing that we're getting more super chats with fucking Ben here as well, and I'm getting offended by that as well. I mean, we had one last week, Chuck. You know what I mean? This is fucking bullshit. Like, just because Ben's here flexing on the
one last
camera.
week was from your audio producer.
That's right.
Thank you, Oscar Losef, for that one. It would have been a lonely super chat section without you, my friend. But fucking Ben, we're selling you like the record company sold Britney Spears back in the day.
This is bookend, Ben. Like we bookended this with praise of one side and praise. This is great for you.
You're welcome.
He did it again.
It's all I can say. I'll bring the audience with me.
Yeah.
Let's close next week, sir. Anyway, thank you all so much for listening to The Craic. Thank you to On Air Jordan. Thank you to Oscar Losef. Thank you to Chuck Mindenhall. And thank you to Ben, folks. Me and Ben will be back next week. So will On Air Jordan and Oscar Losef. We love you all very much. Enjoy the Apex event. Give Octagon a go. Go on. Have a little go there. Have a great weekend. We love you. Mwah.